All right, welcome, and thank you so much for allowing me to contribute to you. It's been a very we're having a heat wave in Seattle, by the way. It's been a very long time since I've laid out sort of the ground, the basis of my work, and talked about stages. And I thought it was important to talk about stages as it relates to masculine and feminine dynamics as they're expressed through stages of ego. So let's just talk about this. The diagram that I shared is is really an expression of those as we move along in our development, and it's really important that we pay attention to the fact that these stages really are something that exists. Polarity is also something that exists. It's just there. It already exists, and so the question is, how do we relate to it? And what stages are and what they are not is something that we'll talk about. First of all, what stages are? They're the filters through which we interpret the world. So, and they're also the baseline from which we react. So how we receive information or ideas, or and how we relate to the world, and where we react from, sort of an expression of our values, but it's mostly an expression of our stage of development as it relates to our ego. And what it's stages of increasing wholeness and stages of increasing complexity. So a lot of people have trouble with this idea of stages, with just being further along in our development. But we don't have any trouble in other places. In academics, you get your bachelor's degree, and then you get your master's degree, and then you get your doctorate. In athletics, you're an amateur, or you're in high school sports, and then you're in college or the NCAA or what have you, and then you're in professional sports or not. And so these are stages that we move through where you get ever increasing capacities. And so it is with development. And so it is with relationships and how we relate to relationships and how we relate to, as the topic says, masculine and feminine dynamics. There's a set of slides I'm going to share with you in the comment section when I'm done here. But I want to lay out some of the groundwork for this. So here are other examples of stages: egocentric, or me against the world; ethno or national centric, or gender centric, like me and my people or me and my tribe against the world; and then world centric, or pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional; or pre-personal, personal, and transpersonal; or vengeance, justice, grace; or wake up, grow up, and show up. The triune brain system: the lizard brain to the mammal brain to the human brain; or fight or flight to emotions and memories and habits, and then being able to navigate that. These are naturally occurring stages. And what evolution is, what personal evolution is movement through those stages. And the practice and the evidence of evolution is the capacity to take on an ever increasing number of perspectives. Of course, the benefits of evolution are just generally greater ease, less fear, more skillful means with people, being able to understand a greater number of people, greater resourcefulness and behavioral flexibility, a greater understanding of human dynamics in general, and feeling more free and just generally happier, like less stuff bothers you. It might hurt more but it matters less because you're mostly free. Another way to describe those stages would be to have no emotional choice, like you're sort of run by your emotions, and then having some choice and flexibility, and then being emotionally free. That's how those stages occur there. So, how evolution is accelerated is we have to let go or dissolve things at the stage that we're at, and embrace certain things. We have to expand our world, expand our map. That may be dissolving some beliefs, or embracing counter examples of those beliefs or moral frameworks, and allowing more in, expanding the way we relate to our experience. Essentially, being able to say yes to more things or being okay with more things. So that's the basis of personal evolution. That could have been a 90 minutes in and of itself, but I want to keep this short and terse. So if you have any questions, feel free, of course, to ask them at any point. But let's move into how this relates to masculine and feminine dynamics, and how people relate to those things based on their stage of development, and how relationships show up at those different stages of development. So first, polarity just exists. Some people, and we'll talk about why they relate to it in certain ways, but some people are saying that it doesn't. Some people are yearning for it again and return to it because of the milk toast nature of some conventional relationships. But there's east and west, there's day and night, there's positive and negative, electrical currents, good and evil, and of course, masculine and feminine. North and south poles, literally poles, polarity. Opposites attract is the idea there, and as it relates to, of course, relating. And then there's the diagram I posted. This is really three expanding concentric circles moving from left to right. That's pre-rational, rational, and trans-rational. Those three stages for you. And there's movement, by the way, and there's a directionality. Sentences contain letters which contain words, but not the other way around. That's the way you want to relate to these things. So at stage one, in terms of masculine and feminine dynamics, people are going to relate to as controlling or needing control. And it's fixed and it's generalized, meaning where you're supposed to be this way in all, a man's supposed to be this way all the time in every context, and the feminine always wants to surrender, the masculine always wants to lead, or something like that, depending on, I didn't mean to mock it so openly, depending. And so there's a lot of polarity coaches out there right now that are talking about this, that it's supposed to be this certain way in every context. That would be stage one, relating. There's a lot of control. There's a lot of polarity. It's hot. It's the fight or fuck relationship also sometimes. It's a dom sub relationship often. And it's fixed in that way. The roles are fixed. They're predetermined. It's supposed to be this way. And then as you move into stage two, there's choice, there's flexibility, and it's contextual. So, well, in this context, that's the way it is. But in another context, maybe it's not. The example I love to give is, my wife my ex-wife was a surgeon. I wouldn't go into a surgical theater and try to lead her there because I'm more masculine or what have you. And then, of course, stage three, there's really freedom. It's fluid and it's situational. It's not just contextual. It's now we moved into situational, and it could even be within the same situation. It's much more dynamic, much more flexible, much more playful. And so those three basic stages are how people move through their relationship, to consciously or unconsciously, to masculine and feminine dynamics. What has occurred in our culture in the last 30 years is there's a lot of guys who, whether they feel, because of the sins of some men, they're not sure how to behave. They're sort of confused. This is part of the problem of that rational or conventional stage of development. Stage two is like, well, we're not really sure who's in control in any situation. Guys are afraid to make decisions. They're not sure how to behave. Women are tired of telling them what they want and how to just lead. And by the way, as a side note, if any man out there is confused, I suggest you go take a partnered dance class so that you learn how to physically hold the woman you're with. And that will translate to you embodying the kind of thing she's looking for, that kind of holding, so she can trust you as you lead her essentially where she wants to go. But that's a whole other conversation. But there's a milquetoast nature. This is one of my favorite words. It just means bland. Like there's a lack of polarity at that second stage, which is what a lot of coaches are trying to address. But instead of expanding and develop, and some people are, by the way, are afraid of that. They're afraid of the next stage, which is even more uncertain. It requires even more fluidity. It requires even more freedom. It requires a total lack of attachment to any outcome and being able to be fluid in the moment and just feeling into what's actually right and what serves now, depending on what's happening. And being able to hold space for all of that. That does require a lot of development. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I know a lot of people think that just connecting, I used to joke that it takes a lot of personal development to just be yourself. It takes even more development to let other people be however they are, as long as they're not impacting your physical or emotional space negatively, but even the emotional space is determined often by how you're relating to what they're doing, not what they're doing in and of itself. And if you relate to that as an opportunity for your own personal evolution, then you're playing a really winning game. So, how we interact with these ideas, these stages, and masculine and feminine dynamics within itself will be determined by our stage of development. Stage 1, there's polarity, but it comes with significant pathology. Stage 2, it's milquetoast, which has its own problems. And stage 3, polarity returns, but it's chosen. One of the ways I like to think about it is, for me personally, a woman who knows she's self-reliant. Like you can't have a stage 3 relationship or stage 3 relating without, with chosen polarity, unless you're already sovereign, you're already self-reliant, and you are already comfortable being alone. Not that you want to be alone, but you're not afraid to be alone, because if you are, and that's a whole, I did a whole conversation with Joe Bernard about a lot of those dynamics, and the need for self-esteem and embodying your boundaries in a way that, it's just woven into your self-respect, is woven into the fabric of your being. So how do you get there? It really does map across all 3 stages. Like the work to be done at stage 1 is pre-rational work. So you have to heal your anger, your fear, your shame, unresolved traumas, any residue you have about relationships, unhealed stuff around relationships, any resentment, things like that. That frees up all that energy and allows you to accelerate your movement to stage 2. And at stage 2, then you get to begin to navigate your experience with more skillful means, your internal experience with more skillful means, as well as navigate your relating with more skillful means. You increase your capacities. You're no longer, remember I mentioned the triune brain system, you're no longer in fight or flight all the time, in lizard brain, because you've actually moved past that. And not that it can't be triggered, but less and less stuff gets triggered. If you have the more advanced mental technologies that can clear that stuff out, you can do it pretty rapidly. And then, you're able to be free from that. And then you can start to play with adding on skills. So clean out stage 1 and, all that basement stuff. There may be other things that come up along the way as you get more and more intimate with somebody. But you need to free yourself of any resentment, residue, imprints from the past, traumas from the past, and of course, anger, fear, anxiety, things of that nature. So you need to clean all that stuff out. And then phase 2 is all about bolting on or expanding capacities. And then stage 3 is really about allowing yourself to, you have to embrace your desires. You have to have self-acceptance around all of it. You have to have the ability to communicate your needs and all of those things. And, the lack of attachment to getting it. And also the freedom to, not that you care, but you just realize it's not a fit if those are expressed and the other person doesn't want to participate. And the more accepting you are of yourself and of your desires, the more you're likely to be able to communicate those sooner, and the more likely you are to figure out if it's a fit or not and get what you want, or realize that it's not an appropriate person with which to couple. I typed this as WO/men, women and men. And some polarity coaches are in favor of regression rather than expansion because it's a return to form. It's more comfortable. It's more familiar. And because the fluidity of the nature of stage 3 is actually kind of frightening for some people if they haven't navigated, I'll say, situations where they were unable to control the outcome, and they're not comfortable with that. It's kind of scary. And so, if we can't expand our world, the other, movement is to contract, regress, and polarize that way. But people who are more sensitive, more developed, it's not going to feel right for you. It's going to feel like like we're returning to the 50s or something. Rather than an expansion, it's a regression. But they do it essentially out of fear or out of the fear of uncertainty. There's a couple other things I want to cover too. The pre-trans fallacy is something we talk about with integral theory, and that is, because the stages, like, I mentioned polarity at stage 1 and polarity at stage 3, but one is chosen and one is not. One is sort of, there's a lack of choice at stage 1, where there's chosen polarities. Just like the difference between codependence and interdependence. Interdependence is a chosen dependency. There's choice there rather than it running you. In terms of evolution, pre-rational, rational, and trans-rational, a lot of people will confuse. They commit two types of pre-trans fallacies. One is to elevate anything that's non-rational to trans-rational. So anything that's non-rational, they see spirituality there, which may or may not be accurate, but that's one of the things they do. Another thing that people do is at the rational stage, they poo-poo anything that is trans-rational. So it might be an authentic spiritual awakening, but because it's non-rational, they'll dismiss it. Sometimes it shows up as ignoring your own intuition, and so some people I've seen say, well, there's no such thing as masculine and feminine lately. That is their rational stage of development dismissing what is there, which is polarity. And again, polarity exists. It's within each of us. There's masculine and feminine dynamics within each of us. There's, penetrating awareness, and there's openness and warmth and compassion. There's the desire for agency, which is inherently masculine, and then for communion, which is inherently feminine. There's nothing wrong with these things. They're not bound by gender. They're just different energetic flows. So I see, a lot of people who are, elevating one and not the other, but also at rational, they dismiss the fact that this thing even exists. I'd be willing to bet they're having milquetoast relationships. So, in sum, the way to get to that third stage is to heal your trauma and dissolve your triggers, dissolve any resentments about relating and gender and that you're attracted to, grieve and complete the past is another way to talk about it. And that moves you to the second stage where you can gain capacity and the freedom that comes from self-acceptance, comfort of being alone and navigating your own interiors. And of course, the third stage is embracing fluidity, situational awareness, being highly sensitive to your partner and what the needs are and how the flux and flow of the nature of your relating is. And ultimately giving yourself and others the freedom to be. Thank you for your time. That's it. I'm going to wrap this up. You know how to reach me at evolutionarycompanies.com or evolutionarygentleman.com. And I will post these slides in the comments below this stream. Thanks so much.